The death of Menglong. The truths the media didn't want you to know. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the city stopped breathing. Neon lights still flickered across the glass towers, traffic cameras blinked obediently, and somewhere a late-night food vendor turned skewers over fire. But in one silent high-rise, something ended. Not with a scream. Not with a struggle loud enough to alert neighbors. Just a moment of gravity, a sudden absence, and a name that would soon be whispered instead of spoken. Menglong. By morning, headlines were already written. Neat, sterile, bloodless. Short paragraphs. Safe language. Convenient conclusions. And just like that, the story was over. Except it wasn't. Scene 1. The last light in the room. They say the last person to leave the apartment noticed the light was still on. A small detail. The kind editors cut because it adds nothing. But rooms don't leave lights on for no reason. Lights are left on when someone expects to return, when a conversation isn't finished, when a thought hasn't reached its end. On the coffee table sat a phone, face down. Notifications muted. On the wall, a framed script, dog-eared, annotated, unfinished. Outside, the city watched. It always does. But no one looked up. Scene 2. The announcement. The official statement came fast. Too fast. A carefully worded message appeared across every platform within hours. Identical phrasing, identical tone. It expressed regret. It asked for privacy. It discouraged speculation. It did not ask questions. Media outlets repeated it verbatim, like a chant. Television anchors lowered their voices just enough to sound respectful, then moved on to the next segment. No investigative breakdown. No timeline reconstruction. No uncomfortable why. The story was already being buried, not under dirt, but under silence. Scene 3. The posts that vanished. Online, fans began asking questions. Why was there no footage? Why were comments disappearing? Why were keywords suddenly unsearchable? Screenshots circulated briefly, then vanished. Accounts were suspended for community safety. Threads were locked to prevent misinformation. But misinformation thrives in darkness. And the darker it got, the louder the whispers became. People remembered things they had ignored before. Interviews where smiles didn't reach the eyes. Projects abruptly canceled. Appearances where exhaustion was disguised as dedication. Patterns don't announce themselves. They reveal themselves after it's too late. Scene 4. The industry that never sleeps. Behind the scenes, the entertainment industry moved like nothing had happened. Schedules remained full. Contracts stayed intact. Profits continued flowing. This wasn't cruelty, it was efficiency. In an industry built on image, grief is inconvenient. Mourning delays releases. Questions disrupt markets. Silence, on the other hand, is very profitable. Those who tried to speak were labeled emotionally unstable, attention-seeking, conspiracy-driven. Truth doesn't need to be disproven when it can be discredited. Scene 5. The unasked questions. Investigative journalism thrives on details, and there were many missing. No independent inquiry. No third-party confirmation. No transparent reconstruction of events. Just a conclusion, delivered like a verdict, without a trial. And in the absence of answers, the public did what it always does. It imagined. Some theories were wild. Others unsettlingly plausible. Most were erased before they could fully form. But one question survived, quietly, stubbornly. Why was there such urgency to move on? Scene 6. The symbolism of falling. A fall is the most convenient ending. It suggests accident. It implies inevitability. It absolves everyone else. In stories, falling is tragic. In reality, it's useful. No antagonist. No motive. No trail. Just gravity and a closed case. Scene 7. The fans who refuse to forget. Around the world, candles appeared in windows. Letters were written and never sent. Songs were replayed with new meaning. Fans noticed lyrics that sounded like apologies. Scenes that felt like goodbyes. Moments that now read like warnings no one recognized in time. Memory became resistance. Because forgetting is the final death. Scene 8. The media mirror. The most unsettling truth wasn't what was said, but what wasn't. Major outlets echoed the same talking points. Investigative pieces were postponed indefinitely. Editors cited lack of verifiable information. Yet verifiable information is rarely handed out willingly. It's uncovered, often at risk. This time, no one wanted to dig. Scene 9. What this story is really about. This is not just about one man. It's about a system where image matters more than well-being. Silence is rewarded. Questions are treated as threats. It's about how quickly a human life can be reduced to a press release, and how easily the world accepts it. Final scene. The light still on. Somewhere in some apartment, a light is still on. Not because someone forgot to turn it off, but because stories don't end when institutions say they do. They end when people stop asking. And as long as someone remembers, wonders, doubts, the truth, whatever it is, remains alive. The night before the silence. The city that night was unusually loud, not with sound, but with expectation. Billboards pulsed. Elevators hummed. Phones vibrated endlessly in pockets like restless hearts. Somewhere above it all, in a high-rise apartment suspended between glass and cloud, time slowed. Inside, the room smelled faintly of coffee gone cold and rain carried in on a coat that hadn't been hung properly. Scripts lay open like split veins on the desk. Margins were crowded with handwriting, not notes for performance, but questions. Why this scene? Who benefits? What am I agreeing to without realizing it? A clock blinked 2:06 a.m. The room that knew too much. The apartment wasn't messy. It was interrupted. A chair pushed back too hard. A glass half full, untouched for an hour. A phone that kept lighting up, then going dark again without being answered. People later said there were no signs of struggle. But struggle doesn't always throw furniture. Sometimes it sits quietly in the chest, tightening, whispering that something is wrong. Outside the window, the city stared back, 1,000 reflections of the same life, none of them listening. The call that never made the record. There was a call that night. It didn't appear in official timelines. It wasn't mentioned in statements. But those who knew the rhythm of things, agents, assistants, insiders who survive by noticing patterns, felt it. A call that lasted less than a minute. A call that ended without goodbye. After it ended, the apartment felt smaller. The air heavier. Even the neon glow outside seemed to dim, as if the city itself leaned closer to listen. The contracts that don't expire. People like to believe success brings freedom. In reality, success often brings ownership, not of you, but over you. Every signature opens a door and closes 10 others. Every opportunity carries invisible clauses written in silence, not ink. Smile here. Stay quiet there. Don't ask about the money. Don't ask about the footage. Don't ask why a scene was cut or why a name disappeared from the credits overnight. By the time you realize the cage is real, it's already gilded, and everyone insists you should be grateful. The moment between decisions. There is always a moment before history changes, quiet, unremarkable, easily missed. A person stands still. A breath is held. A choice waits to be made. That moment happened here. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just a pause long enough for doubt to surface and courage to hesitate. The light stayed on. The city looks away. At street level, a delivery rider stopped at a red light and checked his phone. A security guard leaned against a wall, scrolling through videos with the sound off. Somewhere, a janitor hummed a song from the radio while mopping floors that reflected nothing but fluorescent fatigue. No one looked up.
Cities are trained not to.
The first version of the story. By dawn, the narrative was already assembled.
Simple. Clean.
Painless. Editors love simplicity. It keeps audiences comfortable. Complexity demands attention, and attention leads to questions. Questions lead to discomfort. Discomfort leads to risk. So the first version was released like a sedative. And it worked. For a few hours. The details that didn't fit. It's always the smallest things that unravel the biggest lies. The timeline that skipped minutes. The witness who spoke, then retracted. The footage that existed then didn't. People noticed. Quietly at first. Screenshots saved. Notes written down. Whispers shared in private chats with disappearing messages. Truth learned to walk softly. The machinery starts moving. When doubt surfaced, the system responded smoothly, efficiently, without visible force. Search results changed. Comment sections closed temporarily. Accounts were warned for harmful speculation. No threats were made. None were needed. Fear doesn't require shouting when it's already been learned. The fans who felt the shift. Fans felt it before analysts did. They sensed the sudden coldness long after the studio lights are off. The way grief was packaged Menglong returning to that piano, like a product rushed not to rewrite the song, the way memorials but to sit with it, then vanished. To let it breathe. They replayed to let it remind him why he pauses that now sounded heavy now. Smiles that lingered a second too long. The rain still falls. Jokes that landed like city's coded messages. And somewhere beyond the reach of sound, the light still on again. Not to back in the apartment, but to the long after the authorities found its voice. And the locks were changed. Because even when the light remained on for hours, sung honestly, a technician has a way of lasting forever. But the image lingered. A room mid-thought. A story mid-sentence. A truth waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to finish it. Because before the silence, there was pressure. Before the headlines, there was fear. Before the conclusion, there was a question that refused to stay buried.
Part 1 isn't about what happened.
It's about what was happening, quietly, steadily, invisibly, long before the world was told to stop asking. And somewhere in the dark, the city remembers.
Even if it pretends not to.